Hello, welcome
Oh,
everybody.
live
Thank
already?
you.
Oh, that's what you
We're
meant
live now.
by what?
I took you by surprise. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Welcome to the live show. Guess we're having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, that was me opening the YouTube video in a separate window, and it takes a second for I can mute it. So that was you saying.
and remember when they specifically tell you on StreamYard to not open it in another window like 800 times?
Did they tell you that?
Yeah.
I
As long as you
literally
mute it, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
never seen it.
Okay, welcome. Hello. This is maybe not a great start on
No,
a
it's
topic
fantastic.
on technology, and if we're too stupid, like I don't know if we're showing a best face, but welcome. Um, I am joined by Alan, and he wanted to talk to me about my latest video, which was about post-literacy and whether or not we are in a post-literate society. I actually have no idea what he's going to say to me tonight, so you guys will be as surprised as I am. Alan, do you want to introduce your channel?
I do, but like Book Time with Ryan says, we need to read our pedigrees off so he knows early on to decide. You should side with me. I'm going
to lose a pedigree battle, but you can go tell your pedigree.
Well, you have a master's degree, and I don't, but I encounter fools on the daily basis. I am on the front lines of the war against folly. I'm Alan, and this is pretty much par for the course for every video that I am in the beginning, because Hillary is the literal embodiment of order, while I am the embodiment of chaos. And so this is what happens when the two collide. So yeah, I have a channel about books, Library of Allenxandria, which is impossible to search for because YouTube's always like, did you mean the Library of Alex? If you Andrew from Andrew's Wizardry Reads here,
freaking time.
He said if you just type in the Library of Allen, it pops up, my channel. Oh. But yeah, I'm a teacher. I teach high school. I've taught high school for a decade. This is my 10th year teaching, and I teach Latin and ancient history, Greek and Roman history. And so when Hillary posted her video, like within that was first two sections, I was like, Hillary, I have information. You're dissing these people's anecdotes. No, hold on, I have information, and also Socrates. And so, this is a really interesting discussion to me because I talk to my kids about this a lot. About it's particularly useful for my class because things like memory and vocabulary and literacy and critical thinking and all this stuff I see firsthand with ordinarily high-performing children. The kids who take my class are generally high-performing, college-bound kids, and so I get to reveal the glaring chink in their armor, the gap in their phalanx, if you will, by being like, hey, y'all should know some words that mean things. They don't know anything. Fools.
Well, it's interesting because I definitely think you represent the side of it that is like in the trenches and is maybe getting more, experimental data. I would say my side of it is like, sure, I have a graduate degree, but it's in engineering. It really doesn't have anything to do with like literacy or anything.
Yeah.
But my background, especially heavily in statistics, tends to make me approach subjects from a very high level spot. I want to see numbers. I want to see data. I want to see long-term trends.
Yeah.
So that colors a lot of what I see. So I think it's going to be an interesting discussion about that.
And I agree. Like, I mean, you can't just, there's anecdotal evidence. All anecdotal evidence is not created equal, because otherwise, you hear a guy who heard from a guy who knows a guy that, had this thing, and oh, my friend, his knee hurt and then a meteor hit him. Therefore, when someone's knees hurt, meteors are coming. And it's just like, what are you talking about? Too much. People use anecdotal evidence all the time. They use a single sample size, like a sample size of 1, and then extrapolate it to the general populace. And that's trash. So I'm going to be talking about like the trend I've seen from
over
when
10 years
I started teaching to now, like the things that I can no longer do in my class because the kids literally just either can't or won't, because a lot of this isn't can't. A lot of it is just the way society is. You were talking about attention spans and We need the rush of endorphins and anyway, there's so much to talk about. But
yes, we got a list. It's gonna be good.
They have their cancer, they just won't anymore. So
let's just get started because I think that's a good starting point. You were talking about you wanted to talk about your experience with shrinking competencies in the classroom. So let's start there. Like over your 10 years, like what did you want to talk about with that?
So when you're learning Latin words, the easiest way to memorize or to remember what a Latin word means is to remember derivatives. No derivatives, words that come from Latin roots.
Like try, buy, all that stuff.
Yeah, like first of all, 90% of words with syllables more than 3 in English come from Latin because it's always a Latin or a Greek prefix, and then
the Latin roots. We learn about that all the time.
Correct. The Latin roots. But the problem is that has this specific skill. My children are worse at vocabulary now than they were back in 2013 because they don't actually know any of the derivatives. So it doesn't help them for me to give them these English words, these polysyllabic English words to help remember what the Latin word means because they don't know any of the polysyllabic words, with the exception of the children who always have a book. The kids who read a ton are the kids who excel at this section of the test. So now because I'm so tired of them not knowing English words, because again, they're not going to leave my class remembering how to decline a Latin noun. No one cares. But I can leave them with a larger vocabulary, which is what I'm trying to do. So now on my vocab test on the back, I have, for all of the words that we get, I give them 3 derivatives that I think are like interesting words. Like I taught them malingering yesterday, which is the faking of a physical or psychological condition to get out of duty or work. And I'm like, every one of y'all malingers when you're like, oh, Mr. Walker, I was sick yesterday. Liar, malingerer. And so I try to teach them words that are interesting or useful. And so on the back, I write English sentences that have context and leave a big fat blank. And there's even a word bank of like root words, of derivatives, and they have to fill it in. And they are terrible at figuring out. And these are sentences that if I submitted this to an editor, they would never publish me because they are run-on sentences because I'm literally defining the word in the sentence. And, they're still like, and they still
So that's interesting. So you say from 2013, they've gotten worse at this. Like you have seen worse test scores, worse. So you think it's from a lack of reading? Like what do you think it is? What have you seen your kids talk about that makes you think?
Well, part of it is the gradual decline of teenagers reading in general. I see fewer kids reading with a book in my class than I did 10 years ago. Again, technology has vastly improved in 10 years. But part of the reason they hate reading is because we teach them to hate reading in school. We make them read stuff they hate. So if I already didn't like reading in high school, I also would have hated reading. I actually just didn't read those things and read my own thing and then got an F in my class because I'm like, I'm going to read The Hobbit instead. The fact that this all ties in together.
But I mean, people hated reading when I was in school. So I was in high school, if we're talking about high school, because you're talking about the high school level. I was in high school like 15 years ago. And I loved to read already. So I had no problem reading all the books in high school. I read them all, whether I hated them or not, didn't bother me. But a lot of my friends hated that and said they hated reading forever because of high school and all the stuff they made them do. So I don't feel like that's changed. No. So how is it now you're saying changing to the point where like now people are just giving up? Is it because there's more distractions? Is there more other things to do?
It's because, well, when I was in school, if you didn't want to do your work, you had to work pretty hard, you just kind of sat there. Like there were no phones. There were distractions, but not instantaneous distractions.
I wrote a note to my friend. You wrote a handwritten note.
100%. I wrote notes too. Yes. But then you had to sit there and wait for them to reply. Like you couldn't get an instant reply.
Oh, I mean, mine was like passed between classes. So I'd write it. then you'd wait, and then you'd give it in between class, and then you'd get one the next one.
But part of it is also, I mean, this is just, everything ties in. Part of it's the problem with the American education system that doesn't require, and this is when I wanted to go back to Socrates, when Socrates is witching and moaning about memory loss, about writing down being the loss of memory. I mean, that's a grandpa being like, this new thing, but also
that's why I loved it.
There is truth in, if you do not use your memory, you lose it. Because back in Caesar's time, Caesar, as a child, as a wealthy tutored child, memorized, as did all Romans of his ilk, memorized the entire Iliad and the entire Odyssey. They memorized the whole thing. That's 16,000 lines of poetry.
No thanks.
That's what I'm saying. No thanks. Exactly. I'm not sure I could do that. Like, I'm not sure I could, but I don't.
No way.
And that's because they had no choice. If you wanted to read the Iliad, like, books were not common. So if you wanted to know the Iliad, you bloody better memorize the dang thing. And because so little is required them of memorizing, and that is because we have a computer in our pocket. My children, they have told me flat out, why do I need to know this? I can just look it up. I'm like, we have lost the value of education and knowing things. We do not think that knowing information, that having knowledge is an important skill anymore. We have decided that is no longer valuable, because if you can look it up, it must not be worth knowing. And this is so untrue, because then no one is critically thinking. You always have to look it up. Like I
can defend what you're saying, because there's truth. So when I was in my undergrad and graduate degree for engineering, we had time tests. We had 3-hour time tests. And most of the time they were open book, with the idea being you would be able to look some of these formulas up while you were working, but you would have a time limit. So if you go into this test not knowing anything, you will not finish it in 3 hours. You will not be able to do it. You need to know most of it. But if you forget a number or forget a symbol or whatever it is, in real life, you would get to look it up if it was just one thing. Mm-hmm. And that always stuck with me, because I do think there's this intersection of, like, yes, you can look things up, but you also have to have a fundamental knowledge so that your life isn't impacted. Like, if you're going to work, you're not going to be able to sit there and be like, let me look up, what gravity is. Sorry, that's an engineering one. But it's like, I know what the coefficient of gravity is because I know it,
Exactly. And so, like, today, I get onto my students all the time, and this is, again, how it's changed in the last 10 years. I used to be able to give them 10 Latin sentences, boom, translate that, we'll be done, we'll go over them before the end of class, we'll move on. Now, most of my children cannot translate 10 Latin sentences in a class period. And it is because they do not bother to learn the vocabulary. So they are looking up every word. They will not. And then when they get a test, I said, guys, I don't make the test shorter just because you're slow. That's not how it works. You need to do what you need to do to be quicker at translating. I go over everything, whatever, but they won't learn the vocabulary. So when they get their test, there's always kids who cannot finish. And I don't put 10 sentences on the test, there's 4. And they can't finish it because they translate too slowly, because they rely on being able to look stuff up. I used to give them dictionaries, like when we were doing like passages like Caesar. I'm like, okay, well, memorize what you can for Caesar. Here's the dictionary for the rest. I don't do that anymore. They do it faster without the dictionaries than when they do, because if they have the dictionary, they look up words they know.
They don't try.
Yeah, exactly. It's learned helplessness. We have taught them, because we have taught them to rely on crutches. They do not actually need.
And you think it's the cell phone. You think it's the computer in our pocket that has contributed most to this?
That's part of it. The other part is the American education system, the way we look at it, like what you were just saying about needing that foundation of knowledge. The perfect example. And this is why. So the best kids that used to come through my classroom were kids. I would always ask them, first day of Latin 1. I'm like, which of y'all went to Surfside, which is one of the middle schools? And they'd raise their hand. I'm like, all right, which of y'all that went to Surfside, which y'all had Miss Mott? And they'd raise their hand. And I'd be like, y'all are going to do well in this class. Miss Mott was an English teacher in middle school who taught them grammar, taught them how to diagram a sentence, which is annoying, but literally taught them about sentence structure. These children understood the building blocks of the English language, and they always did better in my class. 201. She's retired now, and I no longer get her children because she doesn't teach anymore. And the perfect example of this is we in America, we decided with education reform, blah, 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 blah. We don't want to be like the rote memorization countries of East Asia, like China and Japan, where it's all like rote memorization. Everybody learns the same thing. You just repeat it. And so we have decided that memorization is tier 1 depth of knowledge, meaning we should never aspire to memorize like crap. That's crap. You need these higher order thinking questions. But they try to make the jump. They try to go from nothing to critical thinking. So when they write essays in high school, because I grade them, now I don't grade them the way English teachers do, but in my Greek history class, I'm like, write me, it's a free response essay of whatever length. They're always like, how long does it need to be? I'm like, I don't want your because of the fact that, because you think it needs to be a certain length. You can just write because, and when you're done answering, you're done. They're all terrible because their teachers say, you need to write a persuasive essay. And like, well, you need to learn to vary your sentence structures, use transition words, make sure you have some conjunctions and like different kinds of sentences. They don't know how to do that. So you're trying to teach them an essay without any of the tools to actually write an essay. If you don't know any words, you can't vary your sentence structure. If you don't know any words, you can't vary your sentence structure. If you don't know what an adverb is or a conjunction is, you can't have transition words and compound sentences. You can't. And
did these kids not grow up watching Grammar Rock, which was my personal favorite of all of the Schoolhouse Rock?
Some of them, when I say conjunction, will go conjunction, what's your function? They don't know what that means, but they'll say,
"Oh, it's useful." I still sing that to myself sometimes.
I agree.
No, that's very interesting because, I'm just thinking back my own high school education experience. I really didn't learn about sentence structure until I took an honors English class my sophomore year of high school, and I had to test to get in there. That's how we did it. And then all of a sudden my writing completely changed because for the better. In fact, I even had a teacher who had me freshman year and then junior year and said, what happened to your writing? Yeah. And I think it's because you need some sort of foundation. That's very interesting what you said about trying to skip the low level thinking for the high level, but not being able to skip that. It's very, very interesting.
Okay. We assume that children are stupid now. Like we assume that children are stupid. I submit to you, and this is always the example that I give when my students are like, nah. I'm like, you shut up. Let me tell you where I learned vocabulary. I want you to listen to the freaking Mencken and Ashman lyrics for the freaking Disney Renaissance. Listen to the lyrics of Little Mermaid and Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and be prepared.
Dude, I talk about this so much.
I learned no fewer than 4 new vocabulary words from Scar's Be Prepared. I didn't know what tenacity was when I heard that song, but Mencken and Ashman didn't assume I was stupid. And so they're like, let's write a song with great lyrics. And you know what? The kids will understand what's happening. And if they're interested, they will look up the word or they'll get it from context. And that's what they did until they shifted. So it went from that to let's go touch the butt. And I'm like, ha 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 ha. Oh, hilarious. Can we get back to when and now I sound like a grandpa. But like those lyrics, they had vocabulary that I didn't understand. I learned a lot from Disney songs.
It's so funny. I talk about this all the time because particularly for me, it was Little Mermaid's Poor Unfortunate Souls.
Yes.
Which just has a wealth of knowledge. And seriously, my son asked, he was like, can I look at the lyrics? I don't understand. He's a big reader. He's 6. And he like looked through the words and asked me, what does this mean? What does this mean? And let me first of all tell you, it's really hard to describe some of those things to a 6-year-old, but it's so true. Like those lyrics are insane. And
what child knows what idle prattle means? After all, dear, what is idle prattle for? Come on there! Not all that impressed with conversation. True gentlemen avoid it when they can. Oh, they doted, swoon, and fawn. Oh, the lady who's withdrawn. It's she who holds her tongue who gets her man. Come on, you poor unfortunate soul. Sorry.
No, I love that song. We sing a lot. You can see now Zach's responding because we literally have talked about be prepared legitimately in my house all the time. That's where I learned the word coup. I did not know what the word coup meant. And then I got obsessed with that word after I learned what it meant. I remember. I was very young.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was actually an amazing rendition. We should probably just stop the video now and you can just cycle through the Little Mermaid songs.
Oh, it's so good. But yes, Kings and Successions.
Yes.
Coup.
I love that song.
Even you can't be caught unawares.
And it's catchy, and like you said, kids get it. Yeah, that's really interesting. I do think that's true in a lot of ways. It's just one of those hard things. Like I like that you have 10 years to see it, because when people are telling me these individual stories, it's hard for me to want to believe them when they're so overblown. My sister is a teacher as well. She's been teaching for a long time, and I do hear the similar things that you are saying from her mouth about, this sort of stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. So I like that so basically to some, you're saying, hey, we have a computer in our pocket, and two, our at least the American school system has changed what they prioritize in a way that is harming.
Correct. And that, I think, is the bigger thing, bigger than the computer, is that we are teaching children, we are telling them that they can't do it. And so since we do not make them do it, they're not I understand. Like I tell them, I'm like, guys, y'all are lazy. And I'm like, I get it. I would also take the path of least resistance. I get that.
Well, when we're teens, we all do. We all do.
I wasn't a good student. Are you kidding? No, I was a good test taker and my teachers liked me, but I didn't like doing work. No.
Okay, well, I was a really good student, but I still was a dumb teenager.
I am shocked that you were a good student. It's just, we don't make them. We act like they can't do it, and so they don't. And at my school, I can't give a report card grade lower than a 50, even if they got a 12 in my class. They boot it up. They raise it to 50. If a kid fails a test, I got to let them retake it. There's no accountability for anything. And I don't want to get into all this, but because of that, we are treating children like they are incapable, and they are not. And some children do actually need assistance, and they do actually need help with learning these skills and need multiple bites at the apple. But good teachers were already doing that. Having it mandate means the high-performing kids game the system. And that is what I deal with every day. And so it's a combination of the fact that the American education system reinforces the fact that they don't need to know anything, because they don't value knowledge. They don't value education for education's sake, especially in Florida. In Florida, they tell you that you go to school so you can get a job. That's the thing. In fact, there's a bill being introduced by one of the state senators here that's going to take away 2 years of scholarship from any kid who is not majoring in a major that will lead directly to employment, as if my non-STEM kids need help feeling bad about themselves. It's just, we tell these children that they have no value if they are not math and science oriented. And it's trash. And it's just we don't value knowledge. We don't value learning. We do not value education. And I think we've lost that. And I think that is part of the reason that people don't, bless you, Hodorable, that people don't want to know anything. And then heaven forbid anybody watches the news where truth.
Let's talk about that later. I have a whole section for that. I have a whole section for that.
That's part of their culture. They see all that. It's why do I need to know anything? We're in the age of the demagogues. It's freaking the 5th century Athens again, where Cleon is going to bring the Spartans down on our head because they won't have a peace treaty. That's a stupid reference. But
I will say, demagogues. Nicholas, I think Alan was saying that he would. Oh, no, that was the wrong one. I'm sorry.
That's true. Education here is horrible.
I was going to say, I think he was saying that, but all students don't need that. There is a laziness, and then you can tell when the student needs it and when the student doesn't need it.
I completely agree with you. But the thing is, like, good teachers are already individualizing for the students who need it. Kids that have ADHD, one, their parent will let me know. Two, the child will let me know. And then I was already, before all this was mandated, when I started, it wasn't all mandated. I was already helping those children because some children just have difficulty paying attention.
Just need a little extra time. Yeah. I think it's interesting because, as someone who was a good student who got straight A's and was always, doing the stuff, I still did have, I think my senior year high school English teacher was incredible. And he challenged me though, because he'd be like, well, Hillary, I know you're going to get an A, but like, are you going to do something that's interesting or challenging? And some of the stuff he's told me is like stuck with me because he wasn't trying to be mean, but he was saying like, well, you're going to get an A, but like, are you really trying that hard to better yourself or whatever? And so I think that is kind of like an interesting topic. Like, I don't know where it was, but Radiant Reed said something about like people can gamify it. And for sure I could do that. I knew how to get an A.
Yeah.
I knew what to do to get an A and I could do it. And it wasn't until a teacher was like, well, okay, you'll get your A, but why don't you, push a little bit here?
Yeah.
That changed a lot for me. I still think about it 15 years later, I'm still thinking about stuff he said to me. So that's just an interesting, topic.
I have students like that who they waste class time because they know they can just look at it and do well. And I have some kids like that. But I try to encourage them to be a good example because they'll then distract. And I'm like, bro, like your neighbors are going to suffer on their assessment because they are not you. And I'm like,
first of all, Alan, I never was a distraction in class. So let's just get that straight.
I believe.
I'm just kidding. I'm just totally making fun of you.
But,
no, I'm poking fun.
But I'm like, if y'all think y'all gonna be like this kid, you are not. You are not going to be like this child. So you guys need to I just want them to do what they need to do to be successful. I have a test on Friday for the section we just finished about the Corinthian War. And it is a section that is laden with people and place names. I don't really do dates unless they're super important, but it's memorizing, yes, but you need to know who did what. Like, you need to know who the people are. And they're always like, Miss Walker, like, I just don't know these people. I just can't memorize these people. I'm like, why? There's literally one big thing about each one.
How could you write a critical essay or a deep essay on, I can't think of the word, but like trying to understand history if you don't actually just know the people and places?
Agreed.
Right? There has to be a fundamental understanding of who was doing what to get to the next level of critical thinking and applying an opinion. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. Applying an opinion to something requires a foundational knowledge.
Yeah. I completely agree. And so they just have, it's scientific fact that teenagers, their brains are still cooking. Their brains are not, they lack fully developed processing of long-term consequences. What is it? The prefrontal cortex is still cooking. So the fact that we have the computer in the pocket and we have instant, and the thing is, I know because anyone who has an addictive personality or ADHD, which I have, and like, I find myself spending way too much time on this bloody thing when I need to be doing work. So if I, who have a fully developed prefrontal cortex and am an old man, I know that they just have difficulty other than the intrinsically motivated kids. And I always tell the kids, I'm like, guys, if you have the ability to prioritize, if you already have that ability and you don't procrastinate and you have the ability to, time management, you are already so much farther ahead of the game than even I was, than even I am. You know what I mean? Like, you guys are ahead of the game. So it's very hard to try to teach them good habits because it's just so easy to if I'm talking and telling them something important, because I have Asperger's, first of all. Second of all, I repeat myself just in general. So I'll be like, hey, nota bene, nota bene, nota bene. To get this, to decline a noun, you drop the stem and add your endings. You drop the stem and add the endings. You drop the stem and add the endings. And then I give them a test. And it's like, how do you decline a noun? And they're like, huh? It's because they overestimate, and then here we are with the Kruger-Dunning effect. They overestimate their ability to both do this
and listen.
be listening to what I'm saying. This is untrue. They are not hearing what I'm saying, and so they lack the good study habits of putting the phone down for a second, or not binging Vampire Diaries for the 14th time, and instead, seriously, I have a student who's like,
just don't believe it. How could you watch that show 14 times? I didn't make it through once.
Literally
anyway.
The words I said, and they said I was in a phase, and I'm like, oh, okay. And so they lack the ability to do that, and so that doesn't help. It also doesn't help that my school and district has no consequences for not being present. If you're absent, nothing can happen. And yeah.
That is not where I grew up, and it is not my current state. We get in trouble for taking our kids out for like 2 days in elementary school. I'm like, my son's in first grade. Let's calm down.
I had a kid today. This child has a low C in my class. This child is on the struggle bus. Comes to me and says, Mr. Walker, I'm going to be out all next week. And I said, let me guess. You're going to Disney World the week before Thanksgiving break, which is a week we have off that you could use to go to Disney World. And they're like, yeah.
Okay, wait. Just to defend Disney folks, but if you go over Thanksgiving break, it's like really, really busy. And if you go like the week before, it's not busy. And so like my family would always take me like on off days and we'd miss school.
Did you have a low C in any of your classes?
No, I had over a 4.0 in high school.
The problem is that
I know. I'm just telling you, the Disneyland thing is specific because Disneyland sucks when it's busy. So I just have to defend it.
I mean, I get it, but it happens all the time. But it's just like
I get it.
Teenagers, and I thought this went away with
but that's someone not caring. You know, there's been students who don't care since the dawn of time. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
But they do care. They care about their grade. They're just not willing. That's the thing. They're not willing. And this is the thing. They care about their grade. They don't care about knowing anything. And they're two separate things. And that's why these 4.0 kids that, I've had an A forever, they run into the wall of Walker. I am the barrier between them and the continued 4.0, because guess what? My class ain't even weighted. So you get a C in my class, that tanks your GPA way worse than the honors classes or AP classes. You are not going to get an A in my class without understanding the material. I will help.
Here's the question. I'm going to interrupt you here. Is it worse though? Is the caring about grade over learning worse now than it was 10 years ago?
Yes.
So you think yes. And do you think that is because of changing goalposts about getting into college and education in general?
There is this myth that if you do not get all A's in high school, you will not get into a good college. So if you get one B, you are not going to go to college. You are going to become a heroin addict who dies in a ditch from an overdose. Those are the only two options. You either get all A's and go to college, dead in a ditch from a heroin overdose. There's no in between. Apparently, like, it is that serious to these children. These children are wound so freaking tightly. Yes, it is a parental problem. They are wound so tightly that I have a lot of sympathy for them, and I cut them a lot of slack. I know it sounds like it's big mean Walker. I cut any child who is trying a ton of slack. I just don't have a lot of tolerance for kids who don't want to do anything. Like for kids who I know are capable, but just are like, whatever. Yeah, there's a bigger pressure to go to college because there's a bigger, Radio Reads knows there's a bigger, because you have to get a good job, which means, do you know, my friend and I, the engineering teacher who teaches next door to me is my best teacher friend. He plays Gloomhaven with us. At the banquet every year for the college-bound kids, we take a bet on an over-under. How many children, because they have all the seniors line up and they say, I'm so-and-so, I'm going to this college and I'll be majoring in this. I'm like, Belle, how many children do you think are going to say biomedical engineering as their major? And it's always almost double digits on how, but I'm going to the biochemical engineering. It's like, no, you're not. Like, no, you're not. Like, you're not. And that's the thing. I don't know what the statistic is, but it's a ridiculous high amount of people that switch their major after their first semester in college,
Hmm.
because all these kids, they're told they gotta be in a STEM field, they gotta be engineer, they gotta be medical, they gotta be like, no one wants to be a lawyer anymore. It's always medicine or science or engineering or something. And then these kids aren't prepared for this. We don't prepare them to go into those classes. We baby them, teach them how to be helpless and how to cheat. And that's the other reason they can't pass my class, because I'm cheat proof and they hate it. And so then they get to college and they're like, well, I don't know how to do anything. And we hear all the time, literally, Hillary, I'm not kidding. My guidance department calls, when it calls like colleges in Florida about transcripts and, sorry, children, they call college admissions office and they tell them where they go to school. The admissions office says, oh, you're from that school that gives retakes. Like,
ooh, yikes.
Like, seriously, this is from actual colleges, and like it's a joke. Like, colleges are not, university. I have plenty to say about them as well. But I mean, we are sending unfired clay to the university with the institutes of higher learning, because we don't require it of them. And our district's like, we have the highest graduation rate we've ever had. Yeah, but that's because you've lowered it so far.
Because you graduate anybody.
Correct. You can drag a corpse over the line and be like, oh, he graduated. It's like, okay, we keep lowering the bar instead of requiring people to raise it, because we think that they can't. We are making policy for the bottom. The bottom needs to be addressed. I completely agree. Good teachers are doing that. Mm-hmm. But when you make policy for the lowest quartile, everyone's being brought down. Everyone. And I'm not trying to be elitist. I am not an educational elitist. I'm not. But I do believe in standards and holding people accountable, because these kids are brilliant. Like you were saying, do these things matter? Like in your video, you're talking about, like, yes, they don't know all this stuff that, I was taught and you were taught, but do they matter? Some of them do. But these kids, they're not getting stupider. These kids are brilliant in completely different ways. They're absolutely brilliant.
Well, and I don't think it's elitist, because you're not saying kids need to know one type of information. You're saying kids need to be challenged and know the things that they excel at and push them in the sphere that they're being pushed, which is very different than being like, if you didn't go to college, then you're not smart, or whatever, the discourse is. I want to move on a little bit, kind of related to something you said. Well, it's related. I want to talk about online resources, because you mentioned news in particular. So I'm thinking like online news and even YouTube and things like that. Do they reward bad journalism?
Yes.
Because to give some context, you will know this, Alan, because you are a YouTuber. But I'm just in like the YouTube sphere, for example, clickbait and videos. There's all these big companies. I think 5 Minute Crafts is one of them, who makes these bombastic videos with a ton of clickbait. They're all terrible content. They've killed people because they're not real. It's a whole thing. You can go look it up. But they are rewarded constantly by the YouTube algorithm because they get clicks. And particularly inflammatory things get clicks on YouTube. So someone saying they hate something, someone going overboard and ranting. Those are the things. Doesn't matter that people dislike it. Doesn't matter that people complain that this is why it's making our society bad or whatever. You're watching it, so YouTube's recommending it, and we're pushing that up. And I think news is like that often as well. News will often try to make titles that generate clicks, which are going to tend to tell half the story because it is a title. And I'm wondering if the internet in that way, is that harming our critical thinking skills?
Yes, 100%. Like, yes, we are. And again, it is the biggest factor in a child's education are the parents. So I can only affect them so much. And I give them what I call hashtag Walker life lessons, where I cut through the bull crap that they're being fed from any side. I'm like, okay, here's the actual deal. But the news and how ubiquitous it is, and how demagogue it is, because like you're saying, like Hillary, which of our videos do the best? The ones that are rant reviews, or the ones that are thoughtful, like, critical analysis of
Thank heavens, one of my thoughtful, my Cosmere video is the highest, but my Dresden video is the second most viewed video.
Yeah, but it's Cosmere. Yeah. Like, it is Cosmere.
Okay, so that doesn't count. But yeah, my Dresden Witcher reviews, they're the most viewed videos. I'm sure it's the same with you.
100%. 100%. Like, if I rant about something, like, boom, and I understand. Like, I understand it. Like, I also like every now and then to see someone tear something apart, especially if it's something that I didn't like. I'm like, yeah, get them. So with the, first of all, there are two things that ruin everything. The infestation of money and then the disease known as politics. Once anything becomes political, it is now useless and is poison. And I say this as a literal poli-sci major. My degree is in international politics with a minor in Japanese, and I despise politics because it's poison. And so that's all the news. Like, it has gotten so bad. I personally go to the bloody Guardian for U.S. news, because I can't find anything. I can't find anybody to tell me what's going on that isn't like, because the thing is, and this goes back to the reading and learning vocabulary and learning about style and methods of persuasion. I teach a little bit of this when I talk about Socrates. I know what to look for. I know what inflammatory language is. I know what
You know the 10 fallacies. You know what the fallacies are.
Correct.
You can recognize them.
When someone chooses this word over this word, I know why they pick this word. And I'm like, that, like, my wife will tell you, I'll be reading an article, and then all of a sudden they'll say something that is like, it's just a hostile language. And I'm just like, you didn't need to say that word. Like, you know what people think when you say that word, or so it's communist and fascist are our favorite buzzwords right now.
Let's not even talk about those.
Yeah,
Trying to keep it
Hillary,
terrible.
we're on the cusp of either being communist China or Nazi Germany at any second. We're one step away. Clearly.
Have you gone outside, Alan? Have you gone outside today? Obviously.
I walked out and I heard the freaking Soviet national anthem playing, and I had to run back inside for fear of Stalin on my doorstep.
It's interesting. Someone said up here, and now I can't find it, but they talked about how we also can tailor our online news consumption, or actually sites do it for us. Mm-hmm. They see what we click on, and then they feed us more of the same, which can create huge echo chambers, which is something when you were getting print media wasn't possible, because they weren't recommending things to you or different sites. And so it's very interesting. I had an interesting experience. I've lived in a few places that are vastly different politically. So on my social media, I have a lot of friends with like very different opposing views. Mm-hmm. And I've had several times where the same event is posted about by two different people, the same video with wildly different headlines and conclusions. And it's so bizarre to see. And it's this interesting thing about how I do see how online media could be hurting our literacy, because it is driven by profit and clicks in a way that print media couldn't be driven by, because it wasn't as quick, right?
And that is how the technology is like feeding into this, because if you had old Wayne who lived in the woods and talked about how, no, the earth ain't round, we're sitting on it's a pyramid, and it's like, whatever, crazy Wayne. But now crazy Wayne has 1,000 other people across the country in his own little Facebook group, or the Twitters, talking about, oh man, we're the society of the pyramid. Them aliens gonna come back and they're gonna take us all the way. They're gonna take us all the way back to their planet, Uranus.
I mean, you don't even have to pretend. There's legit flat earthers. Like that's a thing that exists.
Hillary, did you know that the moon has its own luminosity? It is lit up from the inside, not by the sun. Because if I hold a rock in the sunlight, note it does not reflect light. Therefore, the moon does not reflect the light of the sun. I am now a scientist. And this is the problem. I mean, stands to reason, right? The internet, the discouraging literacy, we are armchair experts. Everyone is an expert on everything. And
I feel called out.
I mean, if I have to pick someone that I know who I am confident when they say I did my research, did her research, I believe.
Yeah, except it's hard because I can say that, but still how do you know? I mean, there's so much internet sources. There's so much. I mean, it is an interesting thing. I would never say that my research is infallible. I try, but it is interesting what you're saying about it. Going back to your in schooling, maybe there is, and I just don't know, but I feel like we need to have classes on internet literacy. I feel like there needs to be now a dedicated resource to here's the inflammatory language you're going to learn on the internet. Here's what you're going to see. How do you check for sources? How do you check for good things? I don't think it's happening. I haven't heard of anyone taking this because it's just because information is ubiquitous. And I kind of talked about this in my last video. Like there's so much of it. It's positive, but it can also be negative.
First of all, ubiquitous, excellent word. It's one of the first derivatives I teach them. It comes from ubi, which means where. And they're like, that's not a word, Mr. Walker. I'm like, I hear ubiquitous all the bloody time. I saw it twice in 2 different books I was reading, took a screenshot, sent it to them over a mine, said, suck it, children. I didn't say that.
But I feel like that's a pretty normal word.
Yeah, they're like, I don't know what that is. But no, yes, you are correct. It is so hard. I teach a little bit of that on because we talk so much about politics I cannot talk about Greece and Rome without talking about political systems. And so we talk so much about demagogues and the kind of language that demagogues use to persuade, to inflame, and to, rile up, to get something based on emotion. And so I do talk a little bit about that. But as far as internet stuff is concerned, the only thing they're told is you can't use Wikipedia, which is stupid because Wikipedia is good. Like
Wikipedia is extremely accurate.
I know.
And it has great primary sources. Going to Wikipedia and then looking at their sources is such a great way to get things.
I tell any kid that's doing a paper for my class, I don't do a ton of papers, but they do. They're like, can we use Wikipedia? I'm like, yes, you can use freaking Wikipedia. Like if you need more sources, scroll to the bottom, see what they're linking and go click on that. Like, why should I not trust Wikipedia? When I'm talking about Xenophon, the stuff that they link, the stuff they're talking about is directly from the Greek that Xenophon wrote. It's like, this is just keeping it all in a handy place rather than me having to run all over the place. Also, I'm not writing scholarly, I'm not publishing in a journal, like neither of these kids. Wikipedia is fine for their purposes. Now, it's not my job to teach them about serious research. If they're going to go into a grad program, that's their job, not mine. So, but yeah, we, like someone was saying in the chat, like we look for things that agree with us. Like we don't like hearing that, that other people think differently than us. And it is really hard to find sources that don't show their bias. And it's really hard to be objective. That's fine. And some show their bias slightly versus like right here, like slinging out epithets and everything. Like those people, that's just hostile. It's just really, really challenging. So the system's stacked against the kids. And then, it is reinforced by the adults in their life who don't know how to do this or are irresponsible if they do know how to do it. And they look up crap. They Google, they'll Google something that they'll just Google the thing they want to hear. They'll pull up the first thing, which is, crazywaynesbasement.com.gov. And they'll click on it and be like, look here. This study shows that the aliens came and made 17 pyramidal planets, but then 16 of them died because of communists. And, and then they're like, I did my research. It's like, you didn't. You did 5 minutes on Google isn't research. I'm not saying that Google can't be a research tool. It can. But 30 minutes on Google isn't research. It's looking something up. And this is the danger. And I try to warn my children. The danger of, in this country, we are at a very dangerous precipice where we are devaluing language. We are making language meaningless. We are robbing words of any meaning. Like Things we live in a society where Sorry, I didn't mean to straight up mean this, but our culture is all about words, because words cost nothing. They are free. They are nearly meaningless. Look at the news. Everyone says everything. No one does anything. They don't have to. They're just blah blah. And I always give this example to my students. I'm like, okay, guys, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your boyfriend says, "Oh, I love you so much. Oh, I just love you so much." Then that same night, your boyfriend leaves the house, goes and cheats on you with your best friend. Only one of those things is true. Either what they said or what they did. They cannot both be true. You can say whatever you want. That costs me nothing to say anything. I can tell y'all right now, guess what, guys? I'm going to give y'all all an A. I don't care what work you do. I'm going to give you guys all an A at the end of the quarter. And they're like, yeah, Mr. Walker, we love you. You're the best teacher ever. I don't have to do it. Didn't cost me anything. That was free. I earned their adulation and it cost me nothing. That's the problem. So when we say words like research, that doesn't mean anything anymore. It means I Googled it, looked at the first site, or maybe the first several sites that say the exact same thing that I want, to say.
This is interesting. This is making me think of, okay, so you're talking about perhaps one part of post-literacy is words losing meaning, words not having action behind them. Like that could be an interesting topic of functional literacy, to add that words still have a certain meaning. And I wonder is there a way that social media plays into saying things that will get likes, will get attention, will get engagement that you do not mean? So that could harm literacy. Do you feel like there is a connection there?
Between
Sorry, let me restate. You're saying, hey, words have meaning, but nowadays they don't have to, we're losing meaning from words because people can say anything and do anything.
Correct.
Is the social media responsiveness, so like I say something on social media and I immediately can tell how liked it is by a number because it's hearted and there are comments, like think about Instagram. Do you think that could contribute to words becoming less meaningful?
Yes. I mean, yes.
I just thought that as you said it.
Yeah, because if you are being inflammatory, if you are saying things that don't mean what you think they mean, to quote Princess Bride, and it gets, and like, we are humans, and teenagers especially. Like that's why most marketing targeted at like teenagers or college kids. Like they are the easiest to influence. When frickin' World of Warcraft introduced achievements, I was like, no, Blizzard, what are you doing to me? Because I am an achievement person. I'm like, oh, get that sweet dopamine, kill 600 wolves, boop, I got it. No reason other than I got the trophy. Yeah, I'm still playing Assassin's Creed Unity, which is an objectively terrible game because I haven't gotten the platinum yet.
Alan, we can agree on this. I have to go platinum too in any game I play.
That's what I'm talking about, Hillary. So yes. So when they see that and they get all those likes for saying that thing, that just encourages them to do the same thing, to do that again. Say that. Keep saying things in that vein that evokes that emotion or that response from the people who are listening. And you may not even set out to do that. I mean, you let's use BookTube, for example. People may not even set out to start a channel the way it ends up, but you may start out something and you want to do all these things and you're not getting traction with like the stuff you want to do. You want to do these really avant-garde, intellectual, like video essays about, how Kelsier and Franklin Delano Roosevelt are the same person, and
I better see this video essay.
Kelsey's revolution is really the Luthadel New Deal or whatever. And, you have those really black and white avant-garde camera angles where it just shows like the corner of a desk and you're out of frame and you want to do those. And then like 3 people like them, or 3 people watch them, all 3 of which are your mother. And then you post instead. So then you post like, well, I'm just going to post like a 2-minute clip of me shouting random stormlight words while standing on my head and, saying, I don't know, singing the Star Spangled Banner. And people are like, oh my God, I never knew Stormlight was so patriotic. Oh, I love it. Like, share, subscribe. I love Stormlight Archives. I love standing on my head. I love whatever I said. Like, now, all of a sudden, all of your videos are now done upside down. You do one that hanging by your legs from the monkey bars. You do one of them like, doing one of those wall stands, and you're and I'm not saying it's bad, but a lot of times people like what we wanted to do is instead determined by what is successful. And so that's the same thing in social media. When you're typing these posts like, I want to engage in reasonable discourse online, hilarious, about this issue. So I'm going to say, I feel that if we look at all these sources, and Cicero, because this is what I'll do, Cicero once said about the Republic, and everyone's like, nerd, shut up, go home, blah, kill yourself, or whatever people say online. And then I'm like, you know what? Immigrants. And then type like, and then everyone's like, yes, oh, yes, because Catiline, called Cicero. That's the best they could come up with. Catiline's like, hey, Cicero, immigrant. And the Romans are like, oh, no. That's been the thing for 2,000 years. And so
it has been the thing.
Yeah. Once you do that, then that's what you're going to do henceforth. Cicero's no longer going to be like, well, I believe that the Republic, they're going to be like, shut up, Cicero. Call Catiline a terrorist again. Call him a terrorist and revolutionary. That'll get it going.
But here's the thing, because I actually wrote this down in my notes to talk about, was exactly what you're saying, because I went and saw the play Hamilton. Loved it. Sorry if there's Hamilton haters. Love Hamilton. So I went home and I read the
I'm listening.
Okay. I read the biography. So I don't know if anyone's read that. It's a very long biography. I wanted to know what was true. One thing I found about Hamilton's time is Jefferson and Hamilton, if you don't know, were angry at each other constantly. They were writing the equivalent of a Twitter war today.
I hate Jefferson.
Back and forth. You hate Jefferson. Yeah. Here's the problem, though. Their insulting each other and doing whatever had to happen in a newspaper. So there was all of this cool down time. So they were blasting each other. I was laughing like this literally sounds like what we talk about on Twitter today. But Jefferson was writing, then publishing in a newspaper, and then Hamilton had to write and get it published in a newspaper. So there was so much time between this. And so I do wonder how literacy is affected by the time, by the instantaneous nature of which we can form and make opinions. Because the process of Hamilton or Jefferson having to sit down and write something on paper, submit it to the print, get it into press, takes so much more cool down period than what you have on a likes of Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is. And I do wonder, I don't have any data, but that has to affect literacy. It has to affect how we think.
100%. Well, again, we're taught to, we are reactionary. We are reactionary as human beings. We're reactionary as a country. Like, America ain't gonna fix a bridge till it's broken. You know why? Because someone else is going to pay for it. And then they'll look stupid because they had to frickin' find the money for it. I hate politics. But we're reactionary as a people. Like, as Franklin said, we're a new race from the British. We're more violent, less refined. Like, we're more reactionary, just especially now. And so I know that my first response, like if I just respond to something, it is far less eloquent than it would be if I stopped and thought about it, because we use the words that first come to our heads when we're not thinking. And so that decreases literacy because we're not reaching for other words. Now, there are people like me and probably like you, Hillary, who we think like, Ms. Walker, why use those big words? They're not big words to me. I just think in more like nuanced language, I guess. Like, there are a bunch of words that can mean something. I picked this one not because I'm trying to make you feel stupid, but because this more accurately conveys what I'm trying to say. Exactly. And so I reach for those. But even then, if I just type a response real quick, I'm always like afterwards, like, man, why didn't I freaking say that? Why didn't I say this other thing? And on Twitter, you can't edit it. I don't know why Twitter won't let you edit your tweet.
I'm not on Twitter.
Oh, you shouldn't be.
It's a cesspool. I will never.
Twitter is a blasted hellscape. It is a post-apocalyptic future that we should all flee.
That's why I'm not there.
I don't know why I'm on it. Like, I have never seen.
Alan, let's make you commit tonight to deleting Twitter. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make you do that.
I'm on Twitter to follow like authors and stuff. Some of them.
I know. There's a huge bookscape on there. People are always telling me I'm missing out, but I can't do it.
You're not, though, because it's the angriest place I've ever seen. I've never seen I've never seen an angrier place. Just chamber of people being like, I am mad at this thing. I hate this thing also. I hate it. You suck. She's mad all the time. But anyway, yes. So,
this is an interesting thought. We can circle back to later.
That is interesting. So, yeah, if it first of all, it says something about the absolute disdain that Hamilton and Jefferson had for each other, that even after all that cool down period, they still wanted to write the hate letter. You know what I mean? Like, when I'm ticked off, I've had to learn. This is something I had to learn as an adult. It took me forever. I used to have I am still impulsive, but I was impulsive with, like, throwing barbs. Now I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be mad, but I'm just going to pace around my room. I'm going to be mad. If my wife's here, I'm going to be like, Christina, you won't believe this.
Yes.
Idiot. And then I don't do anything. But like, if I had all that time, I'd have probably been like, Jefferson's a douchebag, but it's just not worth. It's not worth it's not worth the paper it's printed on. Really, to hate each other that much, where they have that much time in between and still writing the hate.
It's amazing. Everyone should read it. It's amazing.
I mean, that's a masterclass in holding a grudge.
Yeah, isn't that one of the best things of having a spouse? Is something will make me angry and I'll be like, Zach, and then I'll go and yell at him for like an hour about how mad this makes me, and then I can be like, oh, you write a nice email now. That's okay that you did this. I understand.
Yeah, seriously. So we stopping and thinking about what you say, one, will help you get your point across better anyway, and also will free it from. And I'm not saying emotion's bad; it's good, but it will free it from you communicating ineffectively by letting your emotions color what you were trying to say, as opposed to trying to get your message across.
And part of literacy is also just understanding your own bias. Mm-hmm. Like, part of being able to be a good researcher is understanding, going into a question, how you already think about it, and how that's going to influence the sources you find legitimate. And it can be a very difficult thing to take what you know is your bias and then be like, okay, if I put this aside, what am I seeing? And it's really difficult. It's a skill. It's a skill that you're just lifelong developing, I feel.
Absolutely. And again, this is also difficult because I try to teach my kids. We learned the word introspection, and some of them knew introspection, but I'm like, guys, that's called looking inward and examining like why you do things. Socrates has a great quote, and y'all can take this to the bank. Socrates has a great quote that I try to teach my kids because, one, all teenagers are fools. They're all fools. So they shouldn't care what fools think about them anyway. So whatever their friends are saying, who cares? They're fools also. Some people grow out of their folly. Not all. I know many adults who are also fools. I was 30 when I decided that I wasn't going to be a fool anymore. But anyway, Socrates says, so people are like, hey, Socrates, do you hear what those people are saying about you? Why didn't it bother you? People are talking bad about you. And Socrates says, if they're right, I must address it. If it isn't true, it doesn't matter. Meaning, if someone's calling you a douchebag and you are actually a douchebag, you should stop being a douchebag. But if they're calling you a douchebag and you're not, who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what they're saying. And kids are they're so obsessed with image and what people are saying and all that stuff.
But we all are. We can't just say teenagers. It's hard not to be. I mean, the older I get, the less I care about what people think. Because the older I get, you're like, well, this is who I am and I'm fine with it. So whatever.
Teenagers are particularly bad about it.
Yes, I can see over the years me getting less and less. I do think as adults we still have some of it, but it gets less as you grow up. But something you said there was something I was going to say and now I've forgotten. So
it's just about it, like, knowing your bias requires looking inward and admitting that, you know what, I'm not perfect. And our culture does not lend itself to doing that either. We live in a very much, I don't need to apologize for anything. I don't need to apologize. I am unapologetically this. I don't need to apologize for anything. I'm unapologetically a douchebag. If you don't like it, like, sit on it and rotate it, Potsy. So, but it's just like, because of that, you have to be willing to admit that you're not perfect, to look inside and be like, you know what? I do have a bias. I am incredibly biased towards people who have a ton of money and are corrupt and steal from other people and don't go to jail for their blatant theft. I have an innate bias against plutocrats. I do. I know that's my bias, and I have to try to keep that in check when I'm looking at news stories or stuff like that, or reading articles. I have to, before I immediately, because if it says, oh, so-and-so stole so-and-so, and I have to stop myself from immediately sending it on. Christina, look, Christina, look, Christina, look, there's plutocrats. I have to stop and be like, why don't I check this out? Why don't I check this
out? I remember what I was going to say, which is also the fear of dissenting opinions, because dissenting opinion is where conversation happens. Dissenting opinions is where growth and learning often happen. Not that all dissenting opinions are made equal, but it's something I always think of, like when I do a lot of my video essays, I try to say out front, like, this isn't the answer. It is just an answer. So what are you saying about this? And even, that's the whole point of this video, right? You messaged me and were like, I have some things to say about what you said,
The reason we can do that is because your identity isn't wrapped up in your opinion on this. Like, if let's say I completely disagree with everything you were saying, you are not like, oh my gosh, I suck as a human being. Like, I have without this, I am nothing. The identity, making identity our opinions, our identity. That is why people get so violent, like so hostile about, like, I have some of the worst opinions on the internet. Like, as far as books, I have terrible opinions about books, and people are like, hey, Alan, that's a terrible opinion. I'm like, probably. Okay. Like, that's okay. You can hate my opinion. Like, that, it doesn't bother me. And like what you're saying with, I teach my kids Roman oration. Part of Roman oration was to address the facts and then address the opposition, to be like, okay, so on the other hand, people who don't agree with this will say this. This is the argument on the other side. I don't agree with this, but this is the other side of that particular issue. And because that's how the Romans would do it in their court. And I try to teach them that, to be like, hey, when you're arguing, like, acknowledge there is another side and what the opposing view would be. It doesn't have to be. I mean, some opposing views, not all opposing views are made equal. The earth is flat is a bad take. Like that, like the moon has its own bioluminescence from inside is a bad take. Like, that's, you guys,
if you're ever bored, during the pandemic, I went and found like a flat earther website just to read it.
Hillary,
and it is terrible. It's a wild ride.
Hillary, it's awful.
It's wild. It's wild. Yeah, I completely agree with everything you're saying. And I do think it's interesting because a lot of post-literacy discussions focus so much on things like video games and things like any sort of visual media and virtual reality, while missing this point of critical thinking. It is not the words themselves so much, it is the learning that brings you to a different level of thinking. Literacy is so much more, and I address this in my video, but literacy is so much more than reading a word on a page.
Correct.
And what it means. It goes beyond that.
Hillary, I am playing freaking Trails of Cold Steel about the weebest weeb JRPG you can weeb. There must be hundreds of pages of text in this freaking game. Like, people said video.
That was in my video. I was showing Undertale, which have you played Undertale?
I have not played Undertale, but I've heard of it.
I'm obsessed with that game. But there's so much reading, like, or even just like, I loved Dragon Age Inquisition. I played like 200 hours of Dragon Age Inquisition. The stats, the reading, how much information you just have to read on a page.
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't love Inquisition, but I love Dragon Age. But I didn't love Inquisition. Did you use
Iron
Bowl?
People didn't.
Iron Bowl?
It's not like it's the best game ever. I just got really into it. It's just such a fun game. It was just such a fun game. But anyway.
Dragon Age is fun. Dragon Age 4 is coming out soon. They're developing it.
I know. This isn't the time. I'm very nervous. I'm very nervous about Dragon Age 4.
I am just as a very quick.
We have to just talk about it. It's fine.
Put a pin in it. I am cautiously optimistic because EA, like after the disaster that was Mass Effect Andromeda, travesty,
yes,
and then Anthem, which is trash, they have issued an edict. Focus on the single player campaign. None of this multiplayer stuff. They have literally, EA said, scrap any multiplayer idea. You need to focus on the single player.
I've been reading it because it was like 2.5 years ago, this article came out that they were going to focus on the multiplayer, and I died inside.
Same.
I remember where I was standing. I was in my kitchen dying inside because I hate multiplayer games.
Same.
And I was like, this is the end of everything. But anyway.
Because of those terrible, Seth, I'm going to play the Crossbell games when they actually release in English this next year. So hold on. But yeah, so I agree. So I think the disaster that was Anthem and Andromeda, I am cautiously optimistic about Dragon Age 4. Sorry. So that we can get.
No, that's fine. Literacy, guys. Video games help with literacy. That's the takeaway. No, I'm just kidding.
Seriously.
Changing tactics a lot. There is a question I really wanted to talk about, which was brought up a lot in my comment section of that last video, which was, what if the written word was replaced by something else and it was better? So is literacy...
like Rebus puzzles?
Well, no. Their biggest example, which I have a lot of examples for in like sci-fi literature, is, direct to brain, right? That's a lot of what the next step in sci-fi literature is. Like somehow you get a brain implant and information. Have you not read this? Okay.
I've read that in sci-fi. Is that something they're working on?
No, they're not working on it. This is a hypothetical question. Completely hypothetical. Completely. Sorry. Let's back up. A completely hypothetical question. What if the written word was replaced by something else? Could it be better? And so they're talking about that. Specifically, I was thinking Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang has a story about this called The Evolution of Human Science, where he talks about, very interesting, about how if that happened, it could cause a divide between the poor and the rich, because the rich would have more thought and the poor wouldn't. It's very interesting. Also, Ken Liu talks about it in his short story, The Waves. Have you read either of these? They're very obscure,
no,
so I'm assuming not.
Grace of Kings. Next
incredible year. I love Grace of Kings.
I've been told I'm gonna like it a lot. That's what I've been told. So,
but in The Waves, it's interesting because this is about humans changing. So like they change forms, and in the end, you're just a wave. And it's about a person who initially starts loving all these changes and then starts being like, not sure if I want to go where the rest of society goes. Less obscure, because I'm guessing nobody has read either of those. They're excellent, though. I recommend.
Who have read the Ted Chiang stuff. I just have not.
Ted Chiang is amazing. Ready Player One, for example. Let's talk Ready Player One. Most people at least know what that's about. That's not direct into brain, but that's a universe where we're no longer living in reality. Everything's being done in a virtual reality. And let's talk about Facebook changing their name to Meta, and that they're working on a metaverse, which is supposed to be a la Ready Player One. These are just things I'm thinking about. If the written word left, is there something that could be replaced by that was better? Or do we really feel that literacy is so tied to the written word? It's just like a thought experiment.
Okay, so first of all, that's a lot there. First of all, I don't understand why Facebook was changed to Meta. That's dumb, and I don't know what he. I don't.
Should I admit something? So my husband works for Facebook.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Zach. I actually didn't know that. No, you mean he works for Meta?
He works for Meta. So I keep telling Zach, stop trying to make Meta happen. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to say it. I'm never going to say it.
Is Zach the one who named it Meta? Zach.
No. All right. He's just trying to be on board with it. Okay. No. And so I've been a part of these conversations, is all I'm saying. I know what's going on there. But I am curious about
okay. The problem,
it made me think of Ready Player One. And it's interesting because in Ready Player One, well, let me back up.
Aren't they plugged in, and they're in like a virtual reality, like video game
100% of the time they're plugged in. And I have a visceral reaction to it in a negative way. Mm-hmm. Like the idea of telepathy, instant thought. The story in this one about changing forms made me extremely uncomfortable. Yeah. I would definitely be the person being like, no. So that's my bias, right? I'm like, nothing can be better than the written word. And is that true? Just like as a thought experiment, do you think that's true? Or do you think we could evolve and it would be the new, better literacy?
Well, I mean, like you said in your video, the spoken word came first, like before we had the written word, and that,
Oral tradition.
yeah. So, I mean, we could return to an oral tradition society. But as far as the like plugging stuff directly into your brain, and I always have this discussion when I talk to people about like the ability to read thoughts, and that's like one of those things where when you ask for that power, you better ask for the ability to turn it off, because I am certain our brains are not infinite. Our brains cannot hold an infinite amount of information. And so if we can like plug stuff directly into our brain, I think that's the method to like actual like brain death or insanity. Like, I don't think we are meant to process that much information. Like, I don't think our brains can handle it. Like, even like for example,
we may evolve. Maybe we'd evolve.
It would have to be some kind of evolution that went along with the tech. But like, if we had that tech like tomorrow, you ain't plugging that in my brain. You ain't plugging it in my brain. Nope. Boom. Like, we just can't fit that much, like all that information in our heads. Like, that's why, Homer Simpson was like, every time I learn something new, something else dies, or something like that. Like, but it's kind of like that. You learn something new and you're like, because like thinking is a physical activity. Like, it's mental, but everyone here knows, Hillary, those periods of like intense thought where you're intensely using your brain, that's tiring. Like, it's physically tiring, even though you're not doing anything, but like, hardcore engaging your brain. And so everyone knows that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I cannot remember one more thing right now. Or like,
anyone who's studied really hard for a test knows just being exhausted. You've sat there all day studying and you're just drained.
Yuri says that he's not sure it's true. The brain might be more like a language. Maybe. Again, I don't know. Guess what, guys? I am not going to say I did my research and Googled one thing. I'm not a neuroscientist. So I can acknowledge this is articles and speeches. You hear TED Talks and articles about this. The power of the phrase, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't know. Like, and I don't think we think that is okay.
Oh man, they have a great, and Think Like a Freak. If anyone likes Freakonomics, they talk about
Hillary, I love Freakonomics. Hillary,
that's one of my favorite books. I love that book.
Freakonomics and Super Freakonomics changed my freaking life when I read them in college.
Life changing.
Podcast. I love Levitt and who's the other one? Steve Levitt and
I only ever remember Levitt. So you've got
Levitt and Dubner.
Yes.
Oh my God.
They had the book Think Like a Freak. So did you read Think Like a Freak?
There's a Think Like a I gotta make sure. Have I not read Think Like a Freak?
They talked about how you think like they do to write these books. Highly recommend. And they said everyone thinks the scariest three words. Oh, you did read this? The scariest 3 words in the English language are I love you. That's not true. It's I don't know.
That literally may be where I got that. That literally may be where I
wondered if it is, because it changed my life thinking that. And because definitely like being a straight A student, a lot of the times people like that get wrapped up in I must know everything. It was something I got really wrapped up in as a teenager. And when I heard that, it just rang like, hey, sometimes saying I don't know is the most intelligent thing. Is it Shakespeare who says something like the fool doesn't know he's stupid or something? The wise person knows what a fool is. It's not a Shakespeare quote that I just butchered.
Is that something a real like Shakespeare quote, or was it invented in 2012 and stuck on an Instagram graphic? Like Einstein's.
Pretty positive I read it in high school, which is I don't remember it, and we were reading Shakespeare, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm fairly certain that is.
But the idea of saying, hey, I don't know is something in society we're definitely losing. And it's something that it just taught me so much about interactions. And they go on to saying, I don't know, but I can find out as the follow-up, being a follow-up of action.
That's what I say to my kids. First of all, they assume that I was there when Latin was invented. So they're like, why does this have an E here and that has an A there? And I'm like, guys, like, they didn't freaking ask me. I'm not a time lord. Like, I wasn't there to develop it. But when they're like, why is ambulance a derivative of ambulo, meaning walk? I'm like, man, I don't freaking know, but I know it is, but I'll find out for you. It comes from French ambulo and hospital. So it's a walking hospital, moving hospital.
Walking
That's what it comes from, moving hospital. So, but I say that all the time. I'm like, man, I don't know, but I'll look it up. I'll look it up and come back to you. We also learned that pug comes from pugno, which means to fight, because pug, their face looks like a fist. We learned that today.
They do look like they've been punched. I've always thought that.
We learned that today. I'm like, they're like, is pug? I'm like, I don't freaking know, guys.
I don't know how we got here, but I did want to mention something you talked about previously, which about, you had a visceral reaction to the idea of something being in our brains. And it's so interesting because that's my reaction. It's viscerally negative. It's just like, nope, absolutely not. And there's a few different things there. On one hand, it could be us being old people who don't want change, and maybe literacy, if we talk about it, just being able to critically think and understand things, that leaving the written word wouldn't affect that. On the other hand, when you talk about, instantaneous thoughts being in our head, constant access to information, it does make me wonder if there wasn't some sort of evolution. Like, thinking is a quiet activity. In fact, some of the research I did for this video, I have articles, but I'm going to skip them for now, talked about how multitasking is a lie. Like, we don't actually multitask very well when we think we do. So the thought of having to think, but also having a constant run of info in your head, it feels like a dichotomy that I can't understand how to rectify, or how, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I always try to catch myself when I'm being an old man and I don't like them just because of their newfangled whatevers. I desperately try not to badmouth their TikTok because of it. Because TikTok, I even downloaded.
We both hate TikTok, so
I downloaded it to try to figure it out. I had no idea. I'm like, what even is this? I'm like, do you have to know the music you want to use in advance? I don't know any music except Broadway soundtrack. Is that what I'm going to do? Like narrate, like put videos to show tunes?
I'd watch it.
I didn't know how to use it. I'm like, what is, I'm like, I do not think that I am the target demographic for TikTok usage. But my students are always like, Ms. Walker, you gotta get TikTok. I'm like, y'all just follow me on Instagram if y'all need to follow me. So I try not, again, your biases. I am biased against new crap. I don't like new crap. I like, again, I'm on the spectrum. So I am incredibly partial to having things stay the same forever. So I know that I am resistant to change. I am change averse. And so I have to, before I think something is stupid, something the plugging your, yeah.
That's a lot of the sci-fi stories that center around this do talk about that, is eventually the peer pressure of feeling like you're not succeeding.
Seriously.
Very interesting.
But again, what is the definition of success?
Well, but if the goalposts constantly change in a new society that accepts those new things, the only way to succeed may be that way. It is a very interesting dichotomy. And, I actually specifically looked up research on TikTok, Alan. I knew you were not a TikTok fan, just like I am not a TikTok fan. The problem with TikTok and research on it is there's a lot of people like us in the research chairs. So it's difficult to find research that isn't automatically like TikTok's ruining everything. And that's my natural inclination, because I do feel that way.
I just don't like book talk. Like, how do you review a book in a minute and a half? It's not long enough.
Well, I don't think they're real reviews, right? Isn't it more just like fun recommendations?
I don't like that.
Know.
How?
I don't know.
Why are you?
I'm not on TikTok. I can't tell you, Alan. Don't ask me. You're asking.
You are the hypothetical adversary in this conversation. You are a TikTok user for the purpose of this.
I've never been on TikTok. You downloaded it. I've never even downloaded or signed into a TikTok.
When you open it, there's no home screen. It immediately goes into TikToks, and you try to swipe it away, and guess what? There's another TikTok, and you swipe it. It's endless video.
Well, so that was the thing. Most of the conversation around TikTok talks about dopamine, because there is this idea. A lot of people in my comment section also talked about how is changing attention spans really the thing, or is it really that we require more dopamine in our hits now? Like, it's not necessarily that our attention spans are changing. It is more that we require more dopamine hits within the same amount of attention time. I don't know if that makes sense. And they talked about TikTok, and it was interesting because they did talk about what you said about how TikTok is more damaging for younger people whose brains are developing, rather than older people who've already had something set in motion. But they did talk about how with TikTok, it is similar to gambling, because you watch a very quick TikTok and it's funny and it gives you that hit. And then you swipe and it's not funny, but you can just swipe again. And it's the risk of, when am I going to hit the funny? When am I not? And they talk about why that's an addictive cycle.
Everybody knows the best strategy in gambling is just keep playing. You'll eventually win your money back.
Ding, 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 ding. So that's what they talk about. You'll eventually get that high again. And that's not like directly related to literacy, but it did make me think of this idea of like, hey, when we talk about reading a book, let's talk about Grace of Kings, because you're going to read it.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I like Grace of Kings. It was so good. The sequel, Wall of Storms, I just finished, was even better. I loved it. That is not a book that gives you dopamine hits. Yeah. I'm going to, in my review, compare that book to a, oh gosh, the word just left, a Carl Ruberg machine.
Rube Goldberg!
Thank you. Gosh, I couldn't think of the word.
Rube Goldberg machines!
Yes, I don't know why I said Carl. I just looked that up the other day. Those things, I was specifically thinking of the one in that OK Go music video. I don't know if you've seen that music video with that giant.
There's a Rube Goldberg
machine. It's for the song.
OK Go is a band?
It's a band. They do a ton of really funny music videos, but they have a Rube Goldberg machine one. And that took days to set up for how many minutes of footage? I mean, it was days, And I think
This Too Shall Pass is the song.
Yes, This Too Shall Pass. You should watch it after this. Yeah. And I think of Ken Liu and his Grace of Kings, and it's such like that to me. There is so much setup. And then once you get to make the domino fall, once you get to put that first thing, it's just like, yes.
That's awesome. That's
but
awesome.
You have to be able to get through. I mean, it's never boring, in my opinion. It's always very well written, but it is not necessarily like, it's not a Sanderson. It's not like exciting all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Sanderson, is this. He makes the pages fly. I don't know how you can, like, I read Hero of Ages or the Mistborn series so much faster than like any other book that touches my hands.
He's great at giving you that hit that you need, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, Sanderson's like one of my favorite authors. I appreciate both. There's a world where I appreciate them both, but it is interesting because I do wonder. Again, this is a bias, but when we're teaching our children younger and younger to get those hits faster and faster, it feels like it's going to hurt the patience to get through something like a Grace of Kings, whatever it is, whether it's a book or not, where the emotion is delayed.
Yeah.
And maybe delayed by quite a bit, by like 300 pages, 400 pages of reading.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing. It's funny because going into my last video, I actually didn't think that was going to be my opinion. I thought I was going to be like, we're in a post-literate society. And then all this research was like, not really.
Yeah.
But that's my one thing. Like, there's got to be an effect on it, but it's not quantifiable yet.
Yeah. This is all a bunch of factors that all feed themselves. The dopamine thing, that is, you talked about attention span and you're like, well, they just don't have attention span for things they find boring, but they must understand, like, teenagers must understand that part of life is boring. Like, it just is. Like, you cannot go through your life not engaging in mundane or arduous or laborious tasks. You can't. And because of all this, they are losing their tolerance. They are losing their perseverance through things that they find unpleasant or boring. They don't know how to power through those things for the end result, like you're talking about. They will DNF Grace of Kings because it doesn't pay off instantly, rather than and so because it takes a minute to actually memorize Latin vocabulary. Not worth it. Boom. I mean, pull out the thing. And I understand. I also don't like doing boring things. And it's hard for me to power through. So I get it. I do get it. But I mean, because you can get that immediate dopamine hit, which we also know, everything we know about brain chemistry, I'm on medication constantly. And eventually my brain, becomes inoculated to, it becomes, it develops a tolerance for the chemical. Mm-hmm. When I started smoking, I don't smoke anymore, but when I started smoking at 18, filling my uncooked brain with nicotine, that was smart. When I started smoking at 18, I smoked on the weekends, 1 or 2. By the time I quit, 2 packs a day, because I needed more nicotine to get the same, rush. Exactly. And it's the same thing. It's just like, so much dopamine. And the dopamine thing.
Sorry, I got to say this. Absolutely right, Radiant Reads. I don't necessarily think it's Gen Z. Teenagers are always this way. I will admit I was this way as a teenager. But I will say the one thing that's making it a new issue for Gen Z is technology. Mm-hmm. I think that's where it's different, because these things just didn't we all had dumb phones, if we even had a phone. So I think that's where
we had one kid that had the Zach Morris phone, and he used it to call or order pizza, and that's it. And my dad had a truck phone that you plugged into the cigarette lighter, and it powered it, but that was it. But I mean, this also, the freaking inundation of chemicals and the chemical imbalance and all this stuff. Someone was talking about Fit to be Read was talking about the students that struggle in school. A lot of them struggle because of mental health issues. And first of all, don't even get me started on mental health. Mental health in this country is ridiculously expensive to get. I have insurance, and it's still bloody expensive. It fills me with rage. Like, pull yourself up by your bootstrap. Oh, by the way, you can't get the help you need. Suck it is the answer. It bothers me so much. But all of this, the inundation of chemical into their brain is contributing to the mental health issues, the anxiety, and the pressure. So the pressure that the parents are putting on them is contributing to their anxiety. All of the dopamine rush is messing up their brain chemistry, which is contributing to all this other stuff. We have created an ecosystem that is self-sustaining and absolutely deleterious to the mind of these teenagers. Because I'm not trying to act like I'm knocking on these kids. I love my students. They are some of the coolest freaking kids on the planet. But they are also dunderheads who don't know how to use any words. It's just monosyllabic grunting, other than the kids who read. And I just don't know how, like, it's just everything feeds on itself. And like I said, the kids are brilliant in other ways, and in some ways they just.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because I think one thing the articles did say about TikTok was that it's very reversible, which I always think is very interesting. They talked about how, like, these dopamine hits can be literally trained away by, like, they actually recommend, like, reading books is a way to train away your brain from needing instant gratification. So they talked about, just doing things that are slower. You can kind of train yourself to not need that, which I thought was very interesting. I mean, it's beyond the scope of this video to talk about social media in general, how it's affecting us, like just talking about literacy, because obviously, I mean, I talked about that in my video, like it obviously is affecting us. But one thing I think is interesting about the idea of being able to train ourselves is, like, I don't know how many people are parents on our chat right now. I'm a parent. One of the best things I think we can do is just make ourselves not contribute to it. Mm-hmm. So like my kids, they read all day. Why? Because their parents read all day. Mm-hmm. Like, Zach wrote a freaking book. I'm on book 2. We're clearly a family that prioritizes reading. So our kids didn't really have a choice. Mm-hmm. And you'll see that, like, I have friends who love sports. I will be honest, we never watch sports here. So my poor children know nothing. Their kids, I can't even believe what they know about sports. It's incredible, because they care about it because their parents care about it. Like, that's just the bottom line. When you have children, your children care about what you care about.
Yeah.
The positive thing about that is it means that you can guide these things, and just by changing yourself. So I always tell people, you want your kids to read, you start reading. Like, it's not about, you start doing it then. You let your kids see that you're reading a book, and they're naturally going to be like, well, I guess this is important. So I feel like it's not hopeless, but I do feel like we just need to start changing and trying to convince other people to change.
Absolutely.
And
we can only mess with what's in our locus of control. My wife tells me all the time, because I am often bent out of shape about corruption at
things
the
you
top.
can't change.
And my wife, she has to be like, Alan, I love you, but you are not the one who was put on this earth to drag the system down and, die on the barricade like the Les Mis, whatever. Like, I'm not the revolutionary that I so badly wish I was born to be. I'm not the one who's going to overthrow the system and, rid the world of its corruption. So she's like, what can we do? Like, what can we actually do? And that's the thing. So the best I can do is to model for my students. I don't have children, but when I have children, but to model for my students that reading is, first of all, reading is cool. They all know I have a freaking BookTube account. They use my GIFs in Discord and stuff. It's ridiculous. Talk about having integrity and not taking the easy way out. I can model that stuff for my kids, and I can, get involved locally with the people I know. That is what I can change. And, I'd probably live a happier life if I wasn't like, why is everything so, like, I'm trying to channel my Samuel Vimes and just arrest the king. There must be a policeman for kings. But it's just, I'm not put here to fix that. And it's hard. I think we all get bent out of shape about those really large stuff. But like you said, you want your kid to read, you read. I loved reading because my mother loved to read, and my grandma was a third grade teacher who taught me about dinosaurs and handed me a bunch of dinosaur books. And I sat there and look, I could spell freaking Parasaurolophus when I was, before I could read other words, just because, like, that was important. Like, that was something that was valued by my mom and by my, by my grandma. My dad's a great guy, but he says, why are you reading that book? Ain't got no pictures in it. I'm like, Dad, because I'm an adult. That's why.
Because I'm an adult. I have two things I want to bring up with what you just said. I do think we get very concerned with the world, so much to the fact that we forget the community. And I had actually heard a quote recently. I don't remember where it was. Someone was just talking about, they're like, yeah, it's really good. Like, obviously you should try to help people and do things, but do you overlook your own community when you're doing it? And it was such like an interesting thing to me about how, hey, probably the sphere we have the most influence in, we often can overlook. And that would just be your family. But I wonder, I have a question. Since you started BookTube, which I think we started around the same time, you started in 2020, right?
Class of 2020, Hillary.
Class of 2020.
Class of 2020.
Do you have friends who read more now?
Yes. Two of my friends have read all of the Greatcoats and the Books of Babel because they saw me talking about them, and they're like, I got to read that. And I'm like, here you go. And I just let them, I don't even make them buy them. I just like, here you go. I just loan them out of my shelf. And so now I have like kind of a revolving library with those two friends. When they finish a book, they come and borrow another one. Yeah. So because my real life
that was something. Sorry.
No, that's it. I was just saying I have a couple friends who do.
Because that was something I noticed once I started my BookTube and Bookstagram. All of a sudden, I guess people in my life started seeing how much I read. It was more of a thing they didn't know. They knew I was a reader, but they didn't see the depth of what I read. And I have like 4, 5, 6, 7 friends who all of a sudden are texting me, I read this because you told me to read it. I didn't really read a lot, but now I feel like I want to read. Yeah. And it was like one of the coolest things that's happened to me was I wasn't telling them to read. I was just telling everyone how much I loved to read.
Yeah.
And now all these people are reading who haven't read in a really long time.
That's awesome.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and like that's how simple it is. Like I think changing things isn't as hard as we think it is.
Yeah. I got some kids to read. I got one kid read The Poppy War because he saw me talking about it. I got another kid reading The Black Company. One kid is reading Final Empire, and then one kid, I taught my students the phrase ill-gotten gains. I said it, and they're like, "What does that mean, Walker?" And I'm like, what? And I went on a tirade about 20 minutes talking about ill-gotten gains. 20 minutes I talked about it. But then I encourage them when they see the words that we talk about in class, if they see it in the wild, to send me a picture or show me. One kid comes up to me and he's like, Miss Walker, I saw ill-gotten gains. And he showed me ill-gotten gains in the book. And the book he's reading is Guards freaking Guards. And I was like, you get a bonus point right here. Boom. Bonus point. I was like, yes. It was amazing.
Oh, Guards. Let's not get on a tangent, but
so good. You need to read those other books, Hillary.
I know. I've only read 7. Here's a spoiler. My New Year's. I'm reading in order.
Oh, okay.
My New Year's goal for 2022 is to read Discworld. That's like one of my main goals. I'm not going to get through all 30. I already know that. I don't read enough for that, but I'm going to try to make a dent.
I am determined to put more Discworld discussion videos out in the next year as well.
People don't really talk about Discworld very much, despite the fact that Terry Pratchett is such a legend in fantasy. This is another example. I never had picked up a Terry Pratchett book until Brandon Sanderson wrote not the obituary, but wrote an homage to him when he passed away.
That's awesome.
And just talked about how amazing he was. And then I picked up, The Color of Magic, and I was like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Why aren't people talking about this? Although funny story, I didn't know Pratchett was satirical. So let me tell you that I didn't know anything. I knew nothing about him when I picked up that book. So that was a surprise. But
I do not know anyone who had a better command of the English language than Terry Pratchett. He's just absolutely, every time I read, I'm just like, he's so brilliant.
Every sentence.
Like, seriously, it's just absolutely brilliant.
I know this is not the point of this video, but the dedication page in Guards is like one of the best things I've ever read, and it's the freaking dedication page. I opened that book and was like, okay.
This is the people who, are what is it?
This is to the guard. They may be called city guards. They may be called soldiers, palace guards, but their job is in the first 10 minutes of the movie or chapter of the book to rush in.
Yeah, somewhere in the first act to attack the hero, probably one at a time.
One by one, and die. No one asked if they wanted to.
Exactly. Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
I'm just like, he's such a genius. Talk about someone who was literate in every sense of the word.
Seriously. He was the champion against a post-literate society.
Oh gosh, yes. So this is interesting. This video, I think, has been more of the negative side of my part 1 video, where I really kind of talked about we aren't in a post-literate society. Today, I think we talked more about, hey, actually, goalposts are moving. Kids aren't, maybe being as literate as we would like them going forward. But I always still like to end positively, because I do believe it's something that can be changed. I don't think we're past the point of no return yet. Once they start putting chips in our brain, you can ask me again. I'm not sure.
It's true.
But I don't know. Would you say that, Alan? Would you say it's not past the point of no return?
It isn't. Our country is hanging out on a lot of precipices, if you will. We are like, education, for example, is nearing an unsustainable we are nearing a breaking point. Yes, exactly, William. Exactly. I read Terry Pratchett first in high school, and I thought it was brilliant, but I didn't get everything. But I have now, 20-something years later, I get something new every time I read a Pratchett book. But it's not like I didn't understand it the first time I read it. I just get even more out of it now. Absolutely. I completely agree. But there has to be some kind of like culture. I don't want to say cultural revolution because I'm talking about Mao. But
I was going to say Mao. Come on, let's not talk about Mao here.
We definitely don't need to kill all the scholars. That's not what I'm talking about. But there has to be a societal shift. We have to change our values. We have to. The demagoguing has to stop. We've got reasoned discourse. And critical thinking has to return. And it can. We are not past it, because Thucydides, ancient Greek historian during the Peloponnesian War, wrote a quote that sounds like he's talking about modern day America, as far as like demagoguing and zealotry. And it's like moderation was the sign of a coward. And we went past that, like society passed that and entered into, like, it does like this, you know, so history goes in cycles. That's why it's important to learn history. So I do think we can come out the other side of this, having seen, be like, hey, like, what if when we said words, they meant something? What if instead of only caring about ourselves, we gave a crap about other people? What if we tried that? What if instead of like stealing from everybody I know, what if I decided to give back? What if, you know, and in the society changes and we change our mindset, I do think we can get back there. But again, something's got to break before we'll fix it. So, you know, it'll get worse before it gets better. But I do think we can come back before we get the chips in the brain. I am hoping.
I'm hoping. I mean, it might be inevitable. Let's just hope we're both dead. Let's just hope chip in the brain happens after post-mortem.
Oh, I thought you were saying like, I hope we're both dead before it goes back. I'm like, no, I want to be alive.
No, I hope I'm dead before they start doing chip in the brain or telepathic thinking.
Hillary, I don't want, like, I'm afraid I'm going to be around when they're like, we can download your consciousness into this, like, into this robot, and you can live on forever as Walkerbot.
You need to read The Waves. Just look up this short story. Read it, okay? By Ken Liu, The Waves. You need to read that short story.
I don't want to.
What you're talking about.
The Wave.
Yeah. Maybe in 40 years we can reconvene on this channel and talk about how brain chips are ruining everyone. And
Hillary, I will be 80.
What, you think you're going to die at 80? 80 is nothing now. 80 is nothing. You're going to be fine.
I hope that's true. I will gladly take some of that.
I'll be 70.
Yeah, so be old people being like, Hillary, how's the metaverse? Are you and Zach in your Second Life game or whatever metaverse is?
No, we won't be in it. That's the point. We will be on the dead platform YouTube. Everyone else will be in the metaverse, and people will be echo chambering about how we all agree the metaverse is terrible.
Yes, I hope that's the case.
Because right now we're echo chambering. Because the ironic thing about talking about a post-literate society on a YouTube channel with another YouTuber who only talks about books is that the only people watching are people who are very motivated by reading. And so there is like it's a very interesting dynamic that, we have a very specific audience, and it's an audience who is not post-literate.
Also, people who want to tell you suck because you don't like The Witcher and or Dresden.
That is true.
Those people hunt around looking for
if they just said you suck, that would be a lot nicer than a lot. I hope more people just say I suck, because that would be nicer.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, you're a girl. You didn't understand it, Hillary. Have you tried reading it again and this time actually really understanding what it's trying to say?
Leanna and I have talked about that so much because we get that very frequently. And she's always like, I got it.
This happens all the time to me. Like, people they sit there and they'll explain it to me. No, let me stop you here. I understood it. I just didn't like that thing. No, I know why that happened. I just didn't like it. No, I get it. I understood what the author's trying to do. I just don't like that thing. That's fine.
This might be I don't know. I read The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, and I finished it. This was a few years ago, and I was like, that was stupid. I must not have gotten it. So I went online and started reading like forums and like, I don't know, Spark Notes or any of those sites that are supposed to help you understand things. And I was like, oh, I did get it. It's just stupid. Oh, okay, good. I did get it. I got it. I understood all the metaphors, and it's stupid. Perfect.
100%.
Okay.
I completely agree. It's a dumb book. Stupid book. Same thing with Catcher in the Rye. Stupid book.
I thought I was going to love it because Hills Like White Elephants was one of my first short stories I ever read in high school by Hemingway. I don't know if you read it. Fell in love with it.
Don't like Hemingway.
I don't either after reading The Old Man and the Sea. If that's the best he has to offer, I was like, peace.
Yeah, it is not. I don't.
But yes, you don't get it. Classic. Just, I don't agree with you. You guys can go watch my video about what to do when someone hates your faves if you need advice on how better to write something. But thank you for having this discussion with me, bringing your teacher experience into the post-literate experience. Oh, hey, Leanna is actually here when I mention her.
Hillary, this is one of the best discussions that I've had since I've been on BookTube. And people in the comments, like this conversation has been like, super heady. Like, you got to pay attention to follow what we're talking about. So I haven't been able to read a ton of the comments, but you guys in the comments, y'all are brilliant. Y'all have had some freaking the ones I've looked at. Y'all make some such good points. I always try to acknowledge comments when I'm in these things, but I just there's no time. Like we were having spirited discussion, but the ones that I saw, like y'all know, y'all are good people.
You guys are coming up with so much stuff. That's what I'm saying. All of the comments on these videos I make are so insightful.
After
you guys teach me so much.
Tomorrow I may actually pull the video up and actually if you leave the live chat up, I'm actually going to scroll through
I will
see the comments.
I always leave live chat up. It does take like 24 hours though, I feel like always to get in there. But
thank you.
Know what? You're not. I liked it when I was 15. I liked it too.
No, you're allowed to like it. I hate it. I hate it. Or as what who said it? Someone said it. William said, Zane in New York. That is what it is. Zane in New York.
Are you going to give me your Zane impression before we leave?
Vin, they don't love you. They're just using you. They're just using you as a weapon. I understand you. Come, run away with me. We'll go to the Linkin Park concert, and I can get us backstage passes. Well, I'll put it in my wallet that's chained to my belt, and maybe later we'll go to the mall and check out the graphic tees at Hot Topic.
I hate Zane.
What a perfect thing to end on. Post-literacy, people. Guess what? You won't get that joke unless you're literate. So there you go. A reason to go read
Well
of Ascension.
That is a hot take. You take that back.
What?
Vin should have run off with Zane. You stop that.
I didn't say that. Did I say that?
No, Yuri said it. Yuri said it.
Yuri said it.
In the comments.
Yeah, Yuri's also the one who wrote the character Glitter. So I wouldn't take his word for anything. You won't get that reference, but you'll get that reference eventually.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, but yes, thank you so much for having me. This was really, really, really good discussion.
Yes. Thank you for getting heady with me, as you said, getting cerebral.
That's right.
See you guys. Have a good night. Thank you so much for